I am a recovering philosophyholic. Why am I recovering? Because I needed to escape this attitude about thinking we can know things and thinking we're clever. I majored in philosophy in college and went for a master's. So let me just say about academia, it is full of mostly angry people, and a lot of pressure is put on people to try to publish, often steered into political agendas, and in general there's no money to be made, so it's no wonder people feel miserable, and they're going to have prejudice against people with strong willpower, creative minds that are entrepreneurial, stuff like that. And what I studied was phenomenology, which is just a fancy word for trying to study the appearance of things in themselves accurately. So it's what they consider a descriptive enterprise. Essentially, it's an attitude of knowledge where you don't judge things whether they're real or not real. You simply just describe how they appear to you. For example, in experience, you may be looking at a tree and, let's look at the layers of experience. In the perception, there's a feeling of the tree appearing towards you. So there's a you-ness to the experience, a uniqueness. The tree appears as outside. The tree is presented as 3D, even though you can't see the back of it, you sense the back of it. There's a background, there's a foreground, there's multiple colors that are what they call environing. There's a meaning, there's a mood, there's a feeling of the experience. So it's all about experience. Or you may feel someone else looking at the tree. You feel that they're judging the experience. They're an organizing principle. It's a shared space. It goes on and on. It's interesting stuff, but I'm not sure where it leads. A lot of the thinkers feel like it's leading somewhere or informing their morality or their ethics, but ultimately it's just rich descriptions that give you a sense of more richness to life, but in and of themselves, it doesn't really inform meaning in your life. It's all speculation. Someone might say, only if you bring in God to the equation. And this idea that we're creating His image, so we make these worlds. We have our own personal worlds. Some people call it subjectivity, but clearly we're connected, so it's intersubjective. Multiple layers, and of course we carry our history with us through memory. It's all fascinating stuff. I just have a lot of questions for these intellectuals. Is there an end to it? People like Merleau-Ponty, this French guy, he said and Husserl, the guy who basically started, a German guy, Edmund Husserl, who started the movement of phenomenology, basically said it's an inexhaustible enterprise. It's always going to be fine-tuned. There'll be new insights in describing experience. So this is different than the other side, which is analytical philosophy, and that's just easy to make fun of. Analytical philosophy is that philosophy is just arguments, and statements are either true or false, and arguments are either valid or invalid, and the only time you have a winner is if all your statements are true, your argument's valid, and therefore the argument is sound. So analytic philosophers get caught up in defining things and believing that truth corresponds to reality, whereas the continental philosophers, the French and the Germans mostly, they think in what some people call a cohesion theory of truth, that truth is an event that occurs and it's a happening, and philosophy is a matter of describing it honestly as we can, and then within that group there's plenty of disagreement. And then you have your French guys like Michel Foucault, who was a horrible human, pedophile, wrote essays about 3-year-olds consenting, died of AIDS, but he wrote interesting histories, or kind of like Nietzsche, what they call genealogies, where you basically find the structures of power and the evolution of them, citing anecdotal, historical primary documents. So everybody knows about the idea of the panopticon, where we're experiencing surveillance from an anonymous subject. So the idea is, he talked about a prison that had a prison guard at the center and could see anyone, observe any cell at any time. However, the prisoners were unable to see if they were being watched. So the threat of being watched was enough for them to internalize, become their own guards. And that's, societal conditioning. And the other aspect he talks about is administrative power. And he does a history of, he goes back to the Black Plague, and his speculation was this was the time that they started making a registry of people when people were dying. So now they were tracking people, and now there was a written record. Obviously, collecting taxes and whatnot was part of that creation, but now he calls that the written self, and it's categorizing normal and abnormal, sick and unsick. Talks about leper colonies, these exclusion zones and judgments that become the architecture of society, and the transition from where the king would be in charge, and if you broke the law, it would be a personal offense against the king and he would have you executed, to where we are today, where it's you versus the public, which is sort of an anonymous, there's no one to pin it to exactly. It's a sort of self-functioning power. Anyway, towards what end did he do this, considering his lifestyle, which is pretty Luciferian? He never gives an answer. And everybody in academia with identity politics seems to latch on to Foucault, and always talking about liberating and becoming aware of the power structures. But the problem is these people are not grounded. They just seem to have a very shallow notion of ethics. Like, I just should be able to feel like myself and do what I want for the most part, and we need to protect all these people in the minor spaces. And fascism is, anybody who has self-confidence and is not afraid to be strong, apparently. So, I think Nietzsche really got into that notion of slave morality. He accused some of the Christians acting that way. I don't know what to say. I mean, once you become born again and you see that we're created, everything just makes way more sense. Philosophy seems to be, and especially since the Enlightenment, trying to take God out of the equation as simply a clock master that wound the clock and designed everything and his hands off. But once you get born again, his spirit's alive and you live in the moment, become one with God's mind. But if you're not going on that path, then, you think of being lost in the wilderness, and philosophy is just an exercise of describing the chaos, where they're technically correct, especially even if they're not completely materialistic in their thinking. They seem to set these boundaries and have notions of wild being, and try to say that, being a male or female is normative, because they look at multiple cultures. But as I've come to find, it's really just a link between either pagan gods worship or the monotheistic God. And we know that these in-between beings are around, the fallen stars, fallen angels. So, it's clear that you have pyramids all over the world, and they were doing blood sacrifice, getting favors out of these either Nephilim or whatever the hell they are. But just because anthropology discovers so many different cultures, and they try to say, well, this proves there's a plurality to truth, because interpretation leads to the construction of facts for any given culture, is unsatisfactory and speculative, but they take it as a given. So anyway, this is why I had to recover, because you get into this relativistic thinking if you stay on this path, and there's a lot of pressure to not make any claims, but none of them are willing to experiment with trying to let go for a spiritual mystical experience, trying to take the advice of forgiving their parents. Maybe some with Eastern philosophy, we'll mix it in there, but I think there's a big missing element, this notion of being created, that we have a logic to our body as a temple, that we have. And if anything, if I were going to pick one philosopher that I like or consider myself, would be a Platonic thinker or a Neoplatonist, which goes aligned with the Holy Spirit being your guide within, this idea that the soul, and this is a Hindu idea as well, that the soul was at one point perfectly in unison with all perfect forms and had perfect knowledge, and when it came into the body, what they call the corporeal, it gets corrupted and we forget all that knowledge. So in one of his dialogues, in Plato's dialogues, I think it's the Phaedo, he shows that this slave who's uneducated knows innate ideas, concepts such as like the equal. Long story short, I'm definitely buying this idea, and once you tune into that, when you clear your mind from hatred and judgment, it's quite a remarkable thing that all philosophy will pale in comparison. But I just wanted to make this post and share what my experience was in academia for a while, and how you just get wrapped up in egoistic things, trying to come up with original ideas or falling short of honesty. These guys can't be honest. They're definitely lying to themselves, because if they truly believed in nothing, or weren't busy hiding that they choose things to believe in order to build their systems of thought, I think they would eventually have to fall into God's grace, because if you truly just believed in nothing, the only thing left is that light. That's all my 2 cents for now. I just had a few more thoughts. Here is what this Maurice Merleau-Ponty guy, this French dude, only made it to like 55. He's a great writer, fascinating work. He wrote about perception, bodily experience, but he said the task of phenomenology was to articulate the ambiguous clearly. The ambiguous. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Alan Alan Watts. His videos are all over the internet, but he talks about the wiggly world, how, with our language, we try to contain things with definitions, and with our models and measurements, we try to contain something that's quite open-ended and fluid and moving. I mean, even the feeling of enduring time. If you ever had that experience where you get up too fast and you get lightheaded, or if you ever had that lightheaded experience where things kind of break down and nothing makes sense for a moment. If you do jiu-jitsu when you're getting choked out, you probably know this feeling. What we don't realize is the multiplicity. This guy, Henri Bergson, wrote about this, and he had this concept in French called durée, which means duration, but he called it a heterogeneous mixture. Experience was this qualitative flow, and we synthesize things. I mean, you look at the watch on your wrist and it comes together as a whole sense, a whole object that makes sense, although there's multiple parts. So things come to us as meaningful or put together. When you're lightheaded and lack of oxygen, it sort of circuits that. But anyway, so another thing that Alan Watts said about this is, if you were gonna try to analyze a flowing river, it's like if you put a bucket in and try to take out the bucket of water, that's kind of what science does. It objectively extract things out of their meaningful world, which is an event. So going back to what I mentioned earlier, truth is an event, a happening. Many philosophers have talked about this, including Heidegger, who was a Nazi guy, but his philosophy is cool, and he would hit the slopes, lots of pictures of him skiing. He was a total crusher. He's got that book, Being in Time, which will make your head spin because he makes up words, hyphenated words, but I won't even get into that right now. So what I wanted to add was, I feel like in the Gospels, when Jesus talks about being in the world, not of the world, he's nodding to the spiritual reality, which gets missed out in academia, and even theologians, I noticed too, they're just so caught up in their own words and thoughts and concepts that they lack out on the mystical experience, the visceral one we face in the spiritual battle. So that kingdom within is where, we won't get lost in this plurality, this chaos of energy that we find flowing around us, which is infinite, and even philosophers admit is an indefinite, inexhaustible project to describe it and sort of extract more accurate concepts. But here's two things I'm going to say. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this with the Gospels. So this notion of being in the world, not of it, that kingdom within is when you are living, observing, where you don't identify with all these things that are decaying and being born and destroyed, and all the processes that are articulated in philosophy, the emotions, the feelings, the disappointment, the pride, the fear, the doubt, the fear, the worry, that all comes in human drama and natural catastrophes and aging, pain, and suffering. But the more real reality is the spiritual one, which, by the way, you come to this knowledge, it isn't by figuring it out through an argument at all. It's totally when you finally let go of your judgment and find that anger you've been carrying, which keeps you attached to this chaotic world. So long as you're in that, philosophy will make sense. And then you only come up with strategies to cope with the pain and the suffering, to reduce it. But you never solve the problem because you don't see that we're in a spiritual reality where you can have that peace and tap into the kingdom here, being in the world but not of it. And speaking to that, philosophy has a problem where it's trying to clearly articulate with things that are different in kind than art themselves, than aesthetic things. Now, so I think a better way to reveal truth rather than concepts and arguments is 100% literature, poetry, visual arts, because, and my theory is, they don't need to be explained. They reveal truth through the experience, and it's simulating the exact thing that philosophy is trying to articulate separately. So it's homeopathic. So if you want to understand ambiguity, you use ambiguity itself to reveal it. So you feel that experience with poetry. The imagery that the poet translates to you through words resonates in you, the same ambiguity that is so personal to your experience. So it's like sending these magnets, these polyvalent, open-ended structures that tie together your past memories with different forms of knowledge and interpretations you might have. And it evokes feelings and emotions that simulate the thing that the poetry, the truth. So it is like an event. Painting can do that. Literature is great. Film, probably the ultimate version, because it has everything. It has the literature, it has moving paintings, as David Lynch called it, music. And philosophers sometimes sometimes I feel like they're often appreciators of the art, maybe wish they were artists, and they seem to want to justify their importance. And this is coming from somebody who studied it for 15 years. I just want to say that becoming aware of the spiritual battle, getting born again, it's just absolutely amazing. I don't know where my life's leading, but it's so much more exciting to be in the moment and to bury myself into the gifts that God gave us, music. And anyway, the whole point of this video was to talk about how I'm recovering from intellectualism, and I'm a recovering philosophicaholic. Anyway, I hope this makes sense.